Hello and welcome to this introduction to consulting video. Today I'll be walking you through the SCQ and issue tree frameworks. These are core consulting concepts that form the basics of every project. As such, they'll be really useful in your 180 degrees interview, but it'll also be just great to know. Today I'll be walking you through the basics, but it would be great to have a go on your own time to get more comfortable with these concepts.
So firstly, we'll jump into the SCQ framework. SCQ stands for Situation, Complication, Question. It's great to use once you have received a consulting problem, as often they can be multifaceted and hard to define. Going through SCQ will pinpoint exactly what you are solving so that you are sure you are answering the question posed by the facts. So going through the elements, situation will involve understanding the context around the problem. So you might look at facts about the client, competitors, or the wider sector environment. For complication, you should aim to define the issue requiring solving. So it's helpful here to identify what has changed in the facts. Why has a problem arisen, and what is the impact of those changes? Finally, for question, you will formulate the problem in clear and precise terms. So in light of the situation and complication that you have identified, clearly articulating the task that you will need to address. So let's have a look at that in action. The example here is about fictional airline Alpha Aviation. Please feel free to have a pause now to read through the full facts. We can define the situation here as Alpha Aviation having been a successful domestic market leader with a strong reputation, and that as a national airline, its success has been supported by government funding. This provides a key summary about what the business does, its competitive strengths, and business model. The issue is that Alpha Aviation has been a successful brand but is facing funding cuts of $500 million in the next 2 years. Defining the complication in this way makes clear what has changed and the stakes of this change for Alpha Aviation. So pulling all of this together, the question is, how can Alpha Aviation respond to cause a funding shortfall of $500 million per annum over the next 2 years? This pinpoints what needs to be solved and sets the constraints within which to do this. So something to keep in mind as you do any SCQ is to always apply the SMART principles to the problem question that you formulate. This stands for being specific, measurable, action-orientated, relevant, and time-related. Some examples of this is provided for the Alpha Aviation example. So you'll see with the first one that its key issue is that it's not action-orientated. Without setting an actual task to work towards, it's just a statement of fact. The second example lacks relevance to the issue at hand. So asking if Alpha Aviation should do something is a given, and does not add value to the actual problem they have come to you to solve. The third example lacks enough specificity and measurability. Because it's too general, you would not be able to tell if you've achieved your goal. Our last example, how can Alpha Aviation respond to close a funding shortfall of $500 million per annum over the next 2 years, is in line with the SMART principle. The problem that needs to be solved is clear and expressed in a measurable and achievable way. If when formulating a problem question you feel you don't have the specifics to form a SMART question, a tip is to always ask for more information. Ask directed questions and you can try to narrow the scope and produce a more targeted question. Next we'll look at issue trees, which are also a key framework in beginning the problem-solving process. So first off, issue trees do not actually solve problems, but are an essential part of this process because they provide a logical approach to structure your thinking. They're essentially structured mind maps, which break down your formulated question into smaller, more manageable ones. So once you have your problem question, you can break that down into its sub-issues and so on until you have enough to answer your overall question. When constructing an issue tree, a key principle is that each layer of the tree must be MECE, that is, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Being mutually exclusive will mean that the issues do not overlap. So for example, it is mutually exclusive to break down a population by age, but not by ethnicities, as a person may come from a variety of backgrounds and belong to multiple groups. Being collectively exhaustive means that the issues when combined will cover all possible options and that there is no remaining gaps. So for example, it is collectively exhaustive to break profit into revenue and cost. However, it would not be collectively exhaustive to break cost into rent and marketing, as there would clearly be categories of costs missing, such as wages. A tip for being collectively exhaustive is to use formulas, as these by definitions will capture all parts of an answer. So some good examples to know are profit being revenue minus costs, as well as revenue itself being price times the quantity sold. Something to be aware of is that issue trees can come in many types and forms. Two key approaches to be aware of are diagnostic-based issue trees and solution-based issue trees. An example of a diagnostic issue tree is given on the left. These are focused on determining the root causes of a problem. So each branch level will break down the one above it into its key drivers so that by the end you can understand an issue from its grassroots. Alternatively, a solution-based tree, as given on the right, is focused on categorizing recommendations to solve a problem. So each branch level will outline potential solutions to the issue posed above, so that through increasing specificity you can get down to a number of clear and targeted recommendations. Depending on the task at hand, a diagnostic or solution-based tree can be equally useful, so you might like to have a try at both. To see an issue tree in action, we'll return to our alpha aviation example. If you want, now would be a good time to pause and attempt an issue tree yourself, before a sample will be given on the next slide. So here is a sample issue tree for the question posed by our alpha aviation example. Each branch logically flows from the issue before it, creating a comprehensive breakdown of the problem. Have a read through now and see if you can spot the MECE principles throughout. Once you've got to this stage, you now have a really solid base and logical structure for all subsequent problem solving. So for example, you could analyse each branch to suggest specific implementation recommendations or to identify prioritising of different issues. So that concludes this introduction to the SCQ and issue tree frameworks. I hope this has given you a good grasp of the basics of these key concepts. Be sure to check out the rest of our video series for more tips.